quote from this book, which has not been cleared by the Ministry of Defence. So, Brijesh, this is now taken a new twist. The Delhi police are saying that they are registering an FIR to find out A, who leaked this, and B, how did it even reach the public domain without it being cleared by the Ministry of Defence?
See, in a dictatorial state, Zaka, this is expected, and we all know that these kind of repressive measures are taken from time to time. Why do certain people who are just students, why do they languish in jail for years and years, 5 years? So I think this is, as far as repressive governments are concerned, this is something which is par for the course. But I think as far as that is concerned, I think the judiciary will have its final say. But I just would like to refer to what Mr. Tushar said. He said that this is a book which has some defense issues and so on and so forth. This is a subject which has happened over 6 years ago, right? Now, if you're going to very happily, the Prime Minister has repeatedly spoken about what happened in 1962. He has repeatedly spoken about Pandit Nehru in that context. Now, if something from 1962 can be spoken about, why not something about 6 years earlier? Why is the MOD not giving clearance? MOD is not giving clearance because this opinion of General Naravane will come out. Now, what is troubling the government is that this opinion of General Naravane must not come out, and that's obvious, and that's the reason why the MOD clearance is not coming out, why Mr. Rahul Gandhi is not allowed to read the book, right? If a book like Accidental Prime Minister could be repeatedly read by the then why not have this book read and be done with it? Instead of that, Prime Minister, like a coward, he runs away.
Tushar, so Accidental Prime Minister has been quoted. Nishikant Dubey, I think, read out from 6 books.
What does it speak about the Prime Minister?
Okay, let Tushar respond.
Was right. In his assessment of the Prime Minister, he went to the other house and then spoke. This is the least we expect of the Prime Minister.
Let Tushar respond. I mean, Nishikant Dubey quoted from 6 books, not all of which have been published in India, and yet that was kosher. The speaker allowed that, but
they
not.
have been published somewhere. Zaka, now you just.
No, he's also claiming this book has been published in Germany.
No, where? It's not available in Germany. See, there are 2 kinds of circulation that are going on, Zaka. Rahul Gandhi was waving the hard copy. But what reports are suggesting, there is also an e-book that is circulating. The same e-book, that's a pre-print copy. Now, number 2, Mr. Kalappa has said that this is some sort of a repressive regime. Even in America, the serving officers or the retired officers, when they publish their memoirs, they have to go through the Department of Pre-Publication and Security Review. It's a lifelong obligation because when they sign up for the uniform, they sign a non-disclosure agreement. In India also, you have similar measures. These are some very, really sensitive matters. And I'm not just talking about Galwan. You have had soldiers, you've had officers, you've had esteemed, decorated officers who have fought the Kargil War, the 71 War, the 65 War, in between so many innumerable battles. There is a process in place. What worries me is that if today such leaks can happen, it sets a very dangerous precedent for tomorrow. And do not only look at it from the military side. What if tomorrow a nuclear scientist or an ISRO scientist or an atomic energy scientist or anyone from other sensitive sector is weaponized by some agency in the name of leaks? What do we do then?
So Shazia, the book is one part. The other part, he said, was, how can Congress women MPs be accused of trying to attack the Prime Minister? They don't come into the house with weapons. Mr. Gandhi's contention is the Prime Minister was scared and that's why he didn't turn up in the house. He made the exact same speech in the Rajya Sabha.
Zaka, has happened for the first time in the history, the constitutional history of this of our nation, that there have been, as a part of strategy, and such a small-time petty strategy at that 5 women MPs walked in, crossed the lobby, which they don't do, and just to gheraw the Prime Minister. Now, this is, you have a problem with the Prime Minister because you can't win against him. You don't know what on earth to do. You keep getting exposed. Your intellectual bankruptcy is for everyone else to see. But forget about that. You want to insult the Parliament, the Prime Minister's chair, the Speaker's chair. And do you actually want marshals? You want pictures of those the next day that the marshals are actually are taking the women parliamentarians away? There is something called dignity of the House. I don't think anybody is getting it. We know the women were not carrying arms. Nobody's saying that. So let's not be very facetious about it. Let's not be cute about it, because we're not. We get it. And I want to tell the gentleman who was speaking on behalf of Congress Party, do you remember what happened and what Supreme Court had to say in August 25 last year? Rebuke Rahul Gandhi for saying such terrible things about the Indian army and saying that so much of our land, 20,000 square kilometers, has been taken away, and said no Indian can say something like that. Learn from that. You know, Supreme Court keeps, wrapping the knuckles of this gentleman with us, totally intellectually bereft, and he just keeps coming up with new ones. And even now, can you imagine, Zaka? You're right. There is a lot at stake here, but this is 26. You're right, we're talking about 62, why can't we talk about 2020? But can you imagine that we are discussing the budget, something that impacts people, even all the states where Rahul Gandhi's Congress Party is in power, and he doesn't, this bright spark, this crown prince or clown prince has no one question. He's stuck on why he's not being allowed to speak, knowing very well that this is not the primary source, it is unpublished. General Ravne himself has said that. I don't understand, what is his stubbornness?
Okay.
And then because you have been exposed and people can figure out that you're a poor parliamentarian with little regard for the rule book, you try to make it worse, up the ante, and have a strategy, use your women MPs as some kind of a,
shield.
Create some kind of a situation in the parliament.
Quick one-line closing from Tushar, yeah. Quickly.
You know, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Zaka, but it's not that Rahul Gandhi is not being allowed to speak. He's only being requested, and I used the word requested here, that he should just speak and also honor the rules of the parliament. He shouldn't be quoting from an unpublished book. If he's any other thoughts on the, address of the president, he's free to express them. But it's not that he's not allowed to speak. That's where I feel the difference.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Tushar, Brijesh Kolappa, and also Shazia Elmi for joining us. Hopefully, we'll get some debate going in Parliament. We'll know tomorrow. There have been separate meetings between the Speaker and representatives of the government today, as well as representatives of the opposition. We'll see if at all we get a halfway decent debate. Another story that's been really all over the headlines today is this high-speed luxury car crash in Kanpur, and that's triggered massive outrage. This happened Sunday afternoon. A young man was driving a Lamborghini. His name is Shivam Mishra. He went on a rampage, ramming into pedestrians and vehicles. The luxury car first hit an auto rickshaw, then it rammed into a parked Royal Enfield motorcycle. Then it, in the process, flung the rider several meters before crashing into an electric pole. 6 people in all were injured in this crash. Shivam happens to be the son of a tobacco baron called KK Mishra, and perhaps that is the reason why he was not even named in the FIR initially, even though he was driving, even though it's on video that he rammed into all of these people. The police promptly sent him for medical examination without ensuring that his whereabouts were known. So as a result of it, over 24 hours later, Shivam Mishra is evading the law despite there being proof on camera. Shivam's lawyer claims that he was not the one who was behind the wheel, and that is something, it's a standard defense taken by these rich and famous and their kids, that, oh, no, this person was not driving, it was a driver who was driving. Even when the family has refused to cooperate with the investigation, they've blocked the police team from entering their house in Kanpur, their mansion in Kanpur, and yet the police have not given a good enough reason as to why this rich, spoilt brat, who was responsible for the injury of 6 people, ramming his car into these 6 people, why he's not been arrested yet and why he's not been sent for a medical examination.
देखिए, मैं आपको बताना चाहूँगा, ये हाई प्रोफाइल मामला था जिसमें हिट एंड रन का मामला था, जिसके बाद पहले तो इसमें एफआईआर लिखने में 4.5 घंटे लग गए। उसके बाद बाउंसर्स की मौजूदगी में कार को ग्वालटोली थाने में रखा गया और उसके बाद एफआईआर की फर्द में अब इसका नाम बढ़ा दिया गया है, जिसके बाद पुलिस के 2 सब इंस्पेक्टर, 2 कांस्टेबल इस वक्त जहां हम खड़े हैं, देखिए आप साफ देख सकते हैं कि 8/20 आर नगर यहाँ इस वक्त मौजूद है और पुलिस के ऑफिसर्स ने यहाँ दरवाज़ा खटखटाया और खटखटाने के बाद यहाँ किसी ने दरवाज़ा नहीं खोला। लगभग आधे घंटे तक प्रयास होने के बाद हम देख सकते हैं कि अंदर बाउंसर्स मौजूद हैं, 5 बाउंसर्स देखे जा सकते हैं जो वहाँ खड़े हैं, लेकिन दरवाज़ा किसी ने नहीं खोला। यानी कहीं ना कहीं पुलिस के नॉक करने के बाद भी इस दरवाजे को नहीं खोला गया और ऐसे में अब पुलिस की टीम निराश होकर यहाँ से लौटी और ये क्या माना जा रहा है कि अपने सीनियर ऑफिसर्स को इसको अवगत कराएंगे और पुलिस अपना नेक्स्ट प्रोसीजर करेगी, क्योंकि सब इंस्पेक्टर्स ने आइडेंटिटी बताई कि वो ग्वालटोली थाने से हैं और उसके बाद भी दरवाज़ा नहीं खोला गया। पहले जबकि देखिए माइक भी यहाँ सीसीटीवी कैमरा लगा है, उस कैमरे के इसमें ऑडियो कैमरा लगा, उसके उसने बताया यहाँ से कि मैं सब इंस्पेक्टर हूँ, ग्वालटोली थाने से हूँ, ये ऐसे ऐसे मामले में पूछताछ खिलाया, उसके बाद ही दरवाज़ा नहीं खोला गया 25 से 30 मिनट बाद यहाँ से टीम वापस लौट गई। अब अगर पुलिस के अधिकारियों की माने तो पुलिस ने जहाँ एक और फर्द ने नाम बढ़ाया तो पुलिस की टीम अब जांच में जुटी है और ये अनुशासनहीनता है और कहीं ना कहीं पुलिस के लिए भी एक चैलेंज है कि पुलिस की टीम पहुंची है उसको दरवाजा ना खोलना कहीं ना कहीं एक क्राइम की श्रेणी में जरूर आता है।
So will the law not catch up with the high and mighty, the rich and famous, as it were? I'm now joined by a very special guest, Kiran Bedi, former IPS officer, former Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry. So this businessman's son, a business baron's son, he was allegedly drunk while he was driving. He was speeding his Lamborghini, it lost control, it rams into a crowd. Several people are injured. Thankfully, nobody died. But the worst part, ma'am, is he then gets into an argument with the people who've gathered there. His bouncers are trying to push and shove the people who've gathered there. He attempts to run, but the crowd catches up with him. The police have launched an investigation. They've seized the car. But so far, this boy has not been arrested. It's almost like, you know, he can do what he is doing and what he has done and get away without fear of arrest.
Well, that's the image of the law is unequal. In India, it's an unequal law. One law for the high and mighty and the other law for the underprivileged. So I think that's reflective repeatedly again and again. And number two, which is very general, correct, is the fear of law. There is no fear of law. Unless we raise the fear of law and certainty of punishment and then not being able to get away with it, whoever you may be, things will not change. And this is getting exposed again and again. We don't do any surveys. If we would do a snap survey of fear of law amongst the citizens, they will say fear of harassment, but not fear of law.
But tell me, drunk driving and that too ramming people, injuring them while you are drunk, at the very least, shouldn't his license be confiscated? Shouldn't he never be allowed to drive another car again?
Yes, he can be. The law permits you to suspend the license. The law permits you to suspend the license. But how many licenses have been suspended? Can we do a survey? Can we do an RTI? See, how many licenses have been suspended of persons who did drunken driving, that they can't drive for next few years or so? It is, the laws exist, but there is a lack of implementation of the law. Also probably knowledge of the law. And there is no fear of law.
So the sense of entitlement as well. A, like I said, he should have never been behind the wheel of a car, drunk. That he did. And then he's not able to control his car, he rams into people. And the sense of entitlement that after ramming into people, he can just walk away from that place, from that scene, as though nothing happened. And it's only because the crowd got restive that he finally got apprehended.
Wherever you, I don't know. But if he walked away, I think the concerned station house officer or the police officer who was dealing with it has a lot to explain. What is he afraid of? Why did he walk away? Why? What? This is certainly not done.
So
totally not done. Case should have been registered and he should have been arrested by now.
So one suspension of a police official has happened.
And instead, Raka, he should have been even sent for medical examination.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. If this whole thing was basis his drunk driving, then the alcohol in your blood alcohol level sort of is there in your body for about anywhere between 24 to 48 hours. Would that not have already been, diminished somewhat, if not gone already from his system?
No. The urine sample will tell you of even if it's a few days back. It will tell you. The urine sample would indicate. So I think the blood sample and the urine sample. Besides the breathalyzer, if it's been a long time, maybe the breath has got weakened of a smelling of alcohol. But the bloodstream and the urine sample will give the evidence.
So isn't that the first thing the police are obliged to do when somebody is caught in an accident or has lost control of his or her car? One of the first tests that you do is to send this person for a quote-unquote medical, right?
Absolutely. He was supposed to have been arrested and then sent for medical examination.
And that clearly did not happen in this case.
In this case, if he's walked away, then you've lost very important medical evidence, which we were. So they've allowed him to go if he's allowed to go to save himself from medical evidence.
Is it possible now, ipso facto, post facto, to try and, apprehend him and then send him for a medical? Will it at all serve the purpose?
It might, because traces of this will be still available in both blood and the urine sample.
The contrast of the two stories, the one that happened last week, where a young man met his death because he fell into an open pit that was dug up by the
Yes.
Delhi Jal Board. And today you have the story of a boy with a silver spoon ramming into people, injuring them, basically showing that these are the two contrasts, these are the two Indias that we're living in.
Very serious deficiency in grassroots governance. And there's a very serious deficiency in our grassroots governance. And I think our grassroots governance is collapsing. It's collapsing. It's being very selective. It's only being used. It's not delivering. And that's a serious implication, and that's a serious concern for the seniors. And remember, grassroots governance only collapses when the middle level and the top level leadership becomes weak in oversight and supervision and training and involvement and teamwork and grassroots work themselves. I think this is what's happening. The grassroots governance is totally now very weak. People are only afraid to even connect with them because they're not assured of the response. The only thing they can think is, oh, if we go, I will be harassed, or I might get into it. So I think the problem is, it's people at large are losing trust in the grassroots minimum governance, and the fault lies in both middle level leadership and at the top level, because they're not. Okay. It's a disjointed, disconnected governance at the moment between the top and the bottom.
Okay, Kiran Bedi, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us here on Brass Tacks. Thank you. India and the United States have reached a framework for an interim trade agreement under which both countries will lower import duties on select goods and enhance bilateral trade. Union Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal described the India-US interim trade agreement as a historic milestone. He also added that the trade deal is fair, equitable and balanced. The government maintained that India has secured a major trade advantage over its competitors and its peers in this region, while at the same time protecting sensitive sectors like agriculture and dairy. So did India and Trump's America in this entire trade war that the US president has unleashed, has India managed to secure a fair trade deal from the US? Well, it's run into some political rough weather here in India, but at the same time, the big picture seems to be that finally India and the United States can put their relationship back on track. Let's listen into some reactions.
As we began. So this framework, is historic. You've sort of suggested it is. Is it legally binding with enforceable timelines, or is it a political understanding only? Because President Trump can be a bit fickle, and we've seen that. He signed a great deal, as he proclaimed, with Canada and Mexico, and then sort of, it went south. So how do things work?
I think we have very excellent relations, and our deal is very different from what most others did, because we've gone into very great detail, and we've finalized all the contours of what benefits both sides will get, so that it can be a mutually beneficial and very fair and balanced trade deal. So I don't think there should be any issue. The joint statement is out this morning. We already have started discussions to convert that into legal text, and we should be able to be up and about by about mid of March.
Is there any built-in mechanism which holds the US, for example, to its commitments, supposing there is a change?
Well, I think the very fact that we have such good relations with the United States of America, the fact that our teams have finalized everything inter, say, the US and India on paper, I don't see any problem of that.
So in the end, India and the United States have a deal, but how fair, equitable and balanced is this deal? And of course, given the history that we've seen between Trump and the South Koreans, the Japanese, even with the European Union, will this last? Will this trade deal last, or will Trump go back on his word? I'm now joined by a very special guest. Sir Martin Wolf is the chief economics commentator with the Financial Times newspaper. Thank you very much, sir, for speaking with us. First things first, your broad overview of India and the United States now announcing this interim trade framework. They're hoping to sign this sometime in mid-March. But do you reckon this is a fair and balanced deal for both sides, particularly for India, because there was a lot of bad blood and bickering and back and forth that happened over the last 6 months?
Well, I haven't looked at this deal in real detail, so it would be unfair for me to say I'm an expert on the deal. My sense, however, is that it's clearly an improvement on the status quo ante. I mean, with 50% tariffs. And that's very, very important. I mean, let's be realistic. The US is a more important market than India. It's more powerful, and having much better terms of access to the US is extremely important for India. Of course, it is. I would say, nonetheless, the US remains protectionist vis-a-vis India. The tariffs are quite high, and that's a problem. I also happen to believe that opening the Indian economy, and here I include very much the perspective, the deal with the EU and the UK, taking these together, opening the Indian economy is an important benefit for India. I know that's not how it's always seen in India, but I believe India has benefited from the liberalization of the 90s, and I think these deals that India has done, even if they're not strictly reciprocal, require India to open, in some domestic sense, excessively, quote unquote, are in India's interest. So, on balance, this is very much better than the situation before.
How much do you think the fact that I think exactly a week before the India-US trade framework got announced, there was the India-European Union trade agreement that was announced with a lot of fanfare. Ursula von der Leyen was here, Antonio Costa was here, the summit happened. How much do you think that sort of forced Trump's hand, if you will?
One of the things I have learned is really not to try and psychologize Trump. I find him basically incomprehensible. He is so different from people I know and people like me that I can't make sense of it. But it would not seem to me at all implausible that the fact that India has shown itself able to reach important deals with other significant trading partners is a factor in Trump's mind. I mean, he doesn't want, quote unquote, to lose India. He knows, and the Americans certainly know, that India is a very important rising country and economy, which they want to have on their side. I believe that the actions they took with these super high tariffs last year were outrageous. They found a way to get back from it. That seems to me a good thing. And I think it's perfectly plausible that Trump looked at the situation and said, we're getting isolated from the Indian market. We don't want that. So that may well be a factor. In the end, I think it shows that India has big opportunities, which I've always believed in these negotiations, and has every chance, as a number of economists I've read, Indian economists I've read, stress, a very good chance of getting substantial gains from these sets of deals.
There are 2 points of concern. One, of course, concerning Russian oil. I mean, the reason why Trump imposed the ad valorem 25% duty on import of Russian oil, and India was the only country that had to face that. He signed an executive order just as this joint statement was announced over the weekend, where he basically said that I've been told that India has committed to not buying any Russian oil, and therefore I'm reducing this 25 or taking off this 25% ad valorem duty. And in the event that India does go back to purchasing Russian oil, then I will impose or reimpose this 25%. And that's led to some concern here in India because A, the government of India has said we've not made any such commitments, and B, this is at the end of the day a sovereign decision who India buys oil from or who anybody buys oil from.
Well, I can't obviously comment on a deal that I don't know. Clearly, that was part of the discussion. I knew that that's part of the discussion. What has actually been agreed, I don't know. So, and I don't know who does know. Now I'm not an expert on how far India has been able to buy oil from Russia more cheaply than it would have done if it had been on the world market. My own view has always been that oil is an internationally tradable commodity, and the price ultimately set by world demand and supply. So if India buys less oil directly from Russia, Russia will have to find other places to sell it. And that will affect world prices, which will then be lower than they would otherwise have been. And India can buy at those world prices. So the question to me is not how much oil, how much less oil India imports from Russia, but how much more expensive its overall oil imports, both from Russia and elsewhere, as it were, its aggregate oil imports will be as a result of this deal. And to answer that is a very complicated question, because it would have to include an analysis of what the oil India doesn't buy, if it doesn't buy some oil now, where it will go. And I don't know.
So Trump says whatever commitments India has made to buy less of Russian oil, they'll buy American oil. And I think one of his social media posts even suggested possibly Venezuelan oil. You think one could be a replacement for the other? I mean, leaving aside the cost factor, that is.
Well, Trump has a very, very primitive view of economics, and he certainly doesn't understand that oil is a fungible commodity whose prices are set in world markets. I would be extremely surprised if the next cheapest oil for India would come all the way from the United States. I mean, you have some very, very large producers who are rather closer to you. And it's quite expensive to ship this stuff. So it will be very surprising if a decision to buy American oil were the rational decision for India to make, at least surprising to me, once you've decided, if it's decided not to buy Russian oil directly. And I suspect that if India is going to do that, it would either have to pay more than otherwise, which really would be a cost, or in fact, far more sensible, it would buy from the Gulf, most probably, and countries that buy from the Gulf will buy, perhaps European countries buy more from America. This is on the assumption that we're dealing with a world market. Now, if Trump is trying to segment the whole world market by geographical origin, without any consideration of the cost. It's absurd. It's completely ridiculous. But Mr. Trump has so many ridiculous ideas, I wouldn't rule it out.
One of the things, and you know this, historically, India has been very protective of its agricultural sector. And, you know, in the EU FTA, for example, both agri and dairy were completely off. With the US one, at least in the framework that's been announced, there are some agricultural items that India has agreed to import from the US, but a bulk of the staple crops that India and Indian farmers produce seem to have been protected. You think that works for both countries at a time when Trump has also made a big deal about agri and American farmers getting access to markets like India and China, etc.?
Whether it will work politically in the sense that they can hold a deal is not obvious to me. I've always believed that, whether rightly or wrongly, this raises gigantic policy and political issues in India. I've followed India close enough to know that basically the staples are off limits. I mean, you would know better than I, but I've always tended to the assumption that any government, however popular, that liberalized significantly imports of the staples would be overthrown. It's impossible, I think. I may be completely wrong, but I've always assumed that's something that an Indian government couldn't do. And I assume that that is what the Indian government does think, because this is consistent with what it's agreed. And I assume that the Americans understand that. So that will not be part of the deal. The American agricultural industry is obviously affected by many other parts of the Trump trade policies, because he started a trade war, and of course the reaction to that on the other side is to hurt American agriculture. And this is for countries which would normally be big importers of foodstuff, naturally big importers of foodstuff. So I think the Americans have other places to worry about. The chances they're going to get a huge share of the Indian market as things are today, and I would have thought for decades into the future, must be very low, unless I completely misunderstand Indian politics.
All right, one final word. So the only country, major country, with whom America does not have a trade deal now in the last year or so that Mr. Trump's been in office is with China. And he said that he's going to China in April. There's going to be a summit. He desperately wants to cut a deal with Xi Jinping. What does it tell you about the relationship between the two biggest powers, particularly on the trade front, that it's America that seemingly wants a deal with China? He's not able to do to China what he's done with other countries, try and browbeat them into accepting his terms of engagement.
Well, I suppose I have two comments on that. China has demonstrated that it has planned and organized its economy in ways that give it huge leverage. And that was demonstrated in the tariff war over the summer, last summer. And the Americans, I'm sure, haven't forgotten it, because huge parts of their industry, their electrical industry, their electronics industry, digital and so forth, is dependent on Chinese inputs and Chinese both intermediate and commodity imports. So they know that. So the deal is going to be very difficult to reach. It seems to be very difficult. And that links to the second problem, which is Trump's big excuse, if you like, for these crazy tariff policies, as we're going to reindustrialize America. We're going to create manufacturing jobs. Well, who is the biggest and most competitive producer of manufacturers in the world? China. So by definition, his aim must be to stop their exports to the United States, or find some way of getting them, this might be more plausible, to invest heavily in the US, for instance, in the car industry, which would possibly decimate Detroit. So what I find here is I don't see, given the equality of power of the two sides and the immense strategic tensions between them, I've talked about the economics, also obviously geopolitical, I don't see where the deal lands. So it may be there will be a deal, but I will be incredibly surprised if it meant anything economically, and I would be not surprised if it didn't actually last. And I think the Chinese, who are very strategic, unlike Donald Trump, and very powerful, are going to think very, very carefully before committing themselves to something which they think won't work in the long run. And that comes back to the issue you raised at the beginning. With any deal with Trump, including India's deal, can you assume it will last? That he won't change it? No, of course you can't. Trump finds the idea of renegotiating deals constantly. Just look at its US and Canada. That's what he does. So, of course, this isn't settled. It's not settled with India. And even if it's quote unquote settled with China, I don't think it will be.
All right. So, Martin Wolf, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us with your thoughts and perspective on the India-US free trade agreement, as well as, of course, how this trade and tariffs over the last year have changed the whole trading order as we know it. Japan's new Prime Minister took a historic risk and won big. Just 100 days after becoming the first woman to lead the country, Sanae Takaichi called a snap election, betting that voters would back her hard. In fact, her line of politics and her ambitious economic program, all of which the Japanese people have given a resounding mandate to. In fact, they've delivered the Liberal Democratic Party, the ruling party, a sweeping landslide which can potentially reshape Japan's political landscape. It hands Takaichi almost unchecked power at home, and it signals a more assertive Japan on the world stage at a time when Takaichi had run into an assertive and almost hegemonic behavior by China. This is her response to Chinese one-upmanship in the Indo-Pacific. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi of Japan took a huge gamble holding a snap election just 100 days after she became the first woman to serve as Japan's Prime Minister. That gamble paid off. Japanese voters offered her a resounding mandate both for her economic policies and her tough stand on immigration, as well as taking on China. Sanae Takaichi's Liberal Democratic Party won a landslide. They secured an absolute majority in Japan's 465-member House of Representatives, or the lower house of Japan's parliament, the Diet. as of early Monday in Japan, the official results listed by NHK, the public broadcaster, the LDP party had won at least 310 seats. That is massively up from the 198 that it had the last time. The result now clears the way for Prime Minister Takaichi to enact a conservative agenda, whether it's on defense spending, social issues, and also to strengthen her position on the global stage. US President Donald Trump had given her candidacy a ringing endorsement on the eve of elections. The outcome is a remarkable reversal of fortunes for Sanae Takaichi's party, which has governed Japan for much of the last 7 decades. But in recent years, it has suffered a series of bruising defeats in local elections. For the first time in Japanese politics, the LDP was in the unusual position of being a minority in both houses of parliament. That has changed with Sunday's result. Takaichi told NHK after her victory that she had called the snap election because she felt it would be wrong to simply drag things along without seeking a public mandate. Regarding the legitimacy of her government, Takaichi noted that she had felt a sense of unease for a while. Takaichi had taken over from the previous government of Shigeru Ishiba amidst a fallout on rice imports from the Japan-US deal under President Trump.
私は柔軟性が取り柄です。ですから野党からの方々からいいご提案があったらしっかり受け止め、ただ財源は野党の方々探してくださらないので、その政策を実行するための財源も含めてしっかり考えたいと思ってます。
With her party now on a much stronger footing, with a parliamentary majority in both houses of the Japanese Diet, Takaichi will now face very few constraints as she pushes through an aggressive government spending program as well as expansive national security laws. By joining forces with another group called the Japan Innovation Party, Takaichi will be able to harness a supermajority and fast-track her priorities. The LDP will not stand in her way, and there will virtually be no opposition to slow down her agenda. The biggest constraints that she could likely face are external: financial markets, Washington, and Beijing. Takaichi is working to persuade President Trump to maintain American military as well as economic commitments in Asia. The two are in fact set to meet in Washington in March. Trump backed her in a social media post on Truth Social Friday, calling Takaichi a strong, powerful, and wise leader. After her victory on Sunday, Takaichi responded to Trump's endorsement, writing on X that the potential of our alliance between America and Japan is limitless. She's also dealing with the fallout of China's efforts to punish Japan over a comment that she made in support of Taiwan, which is a self-governed democracy which Beijing claims as its own. Back in November, Takaichi had said that Japan could intervene militarily if China were to attack Taiwan. China unleashed a wave of reprisals, restricting Japanese seafood imports, discouraging Chinese tourists from going to Japan, and moving to limit the export of critical minerals or rare earths to Japan. Takaichi was forced to clarify. Now her supporters are hoping that this landslide victory will help send an unequivocal message to China that Tokyo will not back down on the face of Chinese threats. Takaichi soared to victory in part because of her popularity among young people. They see her as charismatic and a dynamic leader and someone who's willing to stand up to China. Takaichi's win comes as right-wing groups in Japan are gaining strength. Sansito, a Japanese political party that shares some similarities to the MAGA movement of Donald Trump, won at least 11 seats. In the last election, they had just 2 seats. The party has an outsized voice in national politics, and it has put pressure on Takaichi to move swiftly. It wants to raise stagnant wages, and it wants to crack down on immigration. Takaichi might push other changes which have been long sought by the conservatives, including enacting an anti-espionage law and amending Japan's pacifist constitution in order to unfetter Japan's military. After World War II, Japan had adopted a pacifist constitution where it gave up the right of first strike and the pursuit of nuclear weapons. Now, that may change. But the economy was front and center in the campaign. Takaichi put forth aggressive government spending programs with the aim to spur growth, but they've also stoked jitters about Japan's staggering debt levels. Japan currently has 200% debt to GDP. A disciple of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and his loose monetary economic policies known as Abenomics, Takaichi too wants the Central Bank of Japan to ease up its purse strings. She's a long-standing proponent of massive fiscal stimulus to break a long-standing deflationary cycle. Takaichi pushed through a record supplementary budget last year. She accelerated plans to increase military spending and to advance large state-led investments in artificial intelligence and semiconductor manufacturing, both of which will have the approval of the Trump White House.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
From Kerala this time, Samastha, a prominent Muslim scholarly body, has now passed a resolution asking for vigilance against pan-Islamist extremist ideologies and organizations following Maududist ideology. These are organizations like the Jamaat-e-Islami. This comes even as opposition leader V.D. Satishan said that the Congress-led UDF will accept the support of Jamaat-e-Islami for upcoming assembly elections. Satishan had said that they do not now have a stand of forming any Islamic republic. But remember, the Congress party has been facing flack as far as being soft on organizations like the Jamaat-e-Islami is concerned, but also either, if not actively, then passively seeking and taking support of organizations like the Jamaat-e-Islami. So you've got another Muslim body in the state now opposing bodies like the Jamaat-e-Islami. They feel Islamist and extremist ideologies. They feel these are pan-Islamist, extremist, ideology-based organizations. So what's really going on? Is there a battle going on between various forms of Muslim thinking in Kerala? How will that shape the upcoming elections is a big question. Let's go across to my colleague Neetu first up. Neetu, what is this body exactly and why are they raising objections to Jamaat-e-Islami? Why do they consider them extremists, for example?
Now, see, Samastha is a Muslim scholarly body. Samastha Jamiyat Ulama is what they are known as. It's a Muslim scholarly body. It's mostly the Sunni faction, and they are politically they are seen more closer to the Indian Union Muslim League, at least one faction of this. So they have been against the Jamaat-e-Islami and their thoughts, and in this resolution also clearly stating, though they are not taking the name of Jamaat-e-Islami, they are clearly saying Maududist ideologies, which means the Jamaat-e-Islami, and clearly stating that certain factions are trying to create this extremist ideology, trying to take the Muslim youth from the mainstream and put into this extreme ideology. So this is something that cannot be accepted. And politically, how it's important is that it comes within days after leader of opposition of Kerala, V.D. Satishan, said that Jamaat-e-Islami's Amir has clearly said that they no longer stand for their demand of having an Islamist nation in a pluralistic society like India and Kerala. So that is, they will accept the support of Jamaat-e-Islami in this elections also if they offer, because this is what their stand is. So this resolution by the Samastha coming in a few days after that, definitely putting the UDF as well as the Congress in the defensive, because Indian Union Muslim League is an ally of the UDF. And when asked this question to P.K. Kunyalikutti on Samastha's resolution, Kunyalikutti clearly not giving a direct answer, but saying that these are different ideologies and both the sections have been talking about their ideologies. So that is something which the Samastha has done. And he goes on to attack the LDF, saying that earlier you all had taken support from Jamaat-e-Islami and you cannot attack the UDF on that. So this is where politically it stands, and ahead of elections all this becomes important, because be it the Samastha or the Jamaat-e-Islami or the other factions, they will all have a say at least in the run-up to the elections when the campaigns are being run, because they can direct the way in which the issues are being discussed ahead of the elections.
So will this push the UDF, the Congress-led UDF, into some sort of a rethink, Neetu?
See, all these factions are important, whether it's Samasta or the other factions. As we have said, a faction of that clearly supports the Indian Union Muslim League. So for them, it becomes difficult to openly say. But at the same time, the stand that the Congress and the UDF will take is that we are accepting anyone's support. We are not in any kind of alliance with the Jamaat-e-Islami or anything. But ahead of last elections, they had offered their support for the Congress and the UDF, and if that is what they are offering this time also, we will be accepting. But talks in these lines will be more ahead of the election, Shivani, because definitely there will be questions asked to the Congress and the UDF, and how will they be explaining to the larger public and also sections within the Muslim community, as it's now Samasta which has passed a resolution against this organization and stating that.
Let me also take a quick BJP reaction. Shehzad Poonawalla is joining us. Shehzad, how do you read into this situation? Do you think the Congress facing not an opposition per se, but a reminder?
Viewers, the Rashtriya Swamsevak Sangh, you all know, has been villainized by the left for decades. It is usually described by this ecosystem as a right-wing, fascist, upper caste, Hindu nationalist organization that has excluded and tyrannized minority religions and caste